Good evening and welcome. Let's talk about the economy, not just the rosy numbers and optimistic projections we often hear, but the deeper, more complex reality that lies beneath the surface. We're not just talking about GDP growth or unemployment rates. We're talking about the shaky foundation beneath us all, the very bedrock upon which our financial well-being is built. A foundation that, for many, is showing alarming cracks. While pundits on television debate the possibility of a soft landing, arguing over whether the Federal Reserve can delicately steer us away from a recession, the truth is, a more precarious situation is unfolding. Our economic system in many ways is as unstable as a Jenga tower built by a toddler. One wrong move and the whole thing could come crashing down. The interconnectedness of global finance means that a seemingly small tremor in one area can trigger a cascade of failures elsewhere. And the reality is, not all states are equally prepared to weather the next economic shock. Some are far more vulnerable than others. Some states have diligently built up rainy day funds, carefully saving for a downturn, while others are woefully exposed, teetering on the brink of fiscal crisis. Tonight, we'll delve into the data and examine the 10 states most vulnerable to economic collapse, states where a perfect storm of factors is brewing. We're talking about states where crumbling infrastructure is not just an inconvenience but a major drag on economic growth, where underfunded pensions threaten the retirement security of millions, and where years of mismanagement and short-sighted policies could spell disaster for their citizens and the nation as a whole. Our goal isn't to spread fear or panic, but to arm you with the facts, to provide you with the information you need to understand the risks we face, and ultimately to inspire action, to encourage informed discussions and proactive solutions before the next economic crisis hits and leaves us all reeling. First up, Kentucky, the bluegrass state, home to bourbon, horse racing, and a pension crisis spiraling out of control. Kentucky's pension system is among the nation's worst funded, with promises it simply can't keep. High poverty, a nearly empty rainy day fund, and a history of slashing essential services leave the state dangerously exposed. Crumbling infrastructure and a cycle of cuts make recovery harder each time. Kentucky isn't just at risk. The collapse of its house of cards could devastate entire communities. Next, Rhode Island, small in size, big in vulnerability. Its economy, reliant on tourism and sensitive industries, tanks fast in downturns. Unemployment spikes and a high cost of living squeezes families when jobs vanish. Aging infrastructure and some of the nation's worst bridges drag down growth. The state's modest rainy day fund offers little protection. Rhode Island's fragile economy and high expenses make it especially exposed to the next recession. Here, small size is no shield from big problems. Idaho looks like a boomtown, but beneath the surface it's a powder keg. Skyrocketing home prices and household debt have left residents stretched thin. Overcrowded schools, strained infrastructure, and a government unable to keep up with growth add to the risk. The economy leans heavily on agriculture, construction, and tourism, all vulnerable to downturns. Idaho's rapid growth masks deep fragility. When the bubble bursts, the fallout could be severe. It's a classic boom and bust story waiting for the next chapter. Arizona's economy is built on real estate and tourism, two sectors that collapse fast in a recession. The 2008 crash hit hard, and the state's reliance on population growth and overheated housing markets hasn't changed. A weak safety net and a looming water crisis add existential risk. Drought threatens agriculture and future growth, compounding economic fragility. Arizona faces a trifecta of volatile housing, tourism dependency, and dwindling water. When the next downturn comes, the state's sunny image won't protect it from a harsh reality. Nevada's economy is a gamble. A high-stakes wager placed on tourism, entertainment, and the allure of chance. The state's fortunes rise and fall with the influx of visitors eager to test their luck and indulge in the unique experiences that Las Vegas and other Nevada destinations offer. But this dependence creates a precarious situation, a constant balancing act between prosperity and potential collapse, almost entirely dependent on tourism and gaming. The bright lights, bustling casinos, and world-class shows draw millions each year, generating billions in revenue. This revenue fuels the state's budget, supports countless jobs, and sustains the vibrant lifestyle that Nevada is known for. However, this reliance on a single industry makes the state vulnerable to economic downturns and unforeseen events. The pandemic showed how quickly things can unravel, how swiftly the flow of tourists can cease, leaving the state's economy reeling. The vibrant energy of the Las Vegas Strip was replaced by an eerie silence, The casinos stood empty and the hotels were shuttered. The consequences were immediate and devastating. Unemployment soared, reaching unprecedented levels as businesses closed and workers were laid off. The lines at unemployment offices stretched for blocks, a stark reminder of the human cost of the economic crisis. Families struggled to make ends meet, and the state's social safety net was stretched to its breaking point, and the Las Vegas Strip went dark. The iconic marquees that once blazed with light were extinguished, casting a shadow over the city. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the usual cacophony of sounds that defined the Las Vegas experience. The economic engine of Nevada had ground to a halt. With no state income tax, a deliberate policy choice designed to attract residents and businesses, Nevada's revenue stream is particularly sensitive to economic fluctuations. Nevada relies on sales and gaming taxes, making it heavily dependent on consumer spending and the success of the casino industry. These taxes fund essential state services from education and healthcare to infrastructure and public safety. So revenue collapses when visitors vanish. The ripple effect is felt throughout the state, impacting businesses of all sizes, from the grand casinos to the small family-owned restaurants and shops that cater to tourists. The safety net is weak, offering limited support to those who fall on hard times. This lack of robust social programs exacerbates the impact of economic downturns, leaving vulnerable populations even more exposed. And unemployment benefits are minimal. The amount provided is often insufficient to cover basic living expenses, forcing families to make difficult choices and rely on already strained community resources. Every bust brings draconian cuts to essential services, further weakening the state's ability to respond to the needs of its citizens. These cuts often target education, healthcare, and other vital programs, undermining the long-term well-being of the community, just when people need them most. The demand for social services skyrockets during economic downturns, placing immense pressure on already underfunded and understaffed organizations. Nevada's High Wire Act leaves its citizens exposed to every economic shock, making them particularly vulnerable to recessions, global events, and shifts in consumer behavior. The state's reliance on a single industry creates a boom and bust cycle that can be devastating for families and communities. When the next crash comes, and history suggests that it inevitably will, the consequences could be catastrophic. The whole state could go bust, leaving Nevada facing an unprecedented economic crisis with limited resources to cope. The stakes are high, and the future of Nevada's economy hangs in the balance. Indiana, the crossroads of America, is dangerously dependent on manufacturing. Recessions and automation threaten thousands of jobs, with little economic diversification to cushion the blow. Past downturns brought factory closures and mass layoffs, a recurring nightmare for the state. The unemployment system is among the least generous, offering little support to displaced workers. Aging infrastructure further weakens Indiana's competitiveness. Over-reliance on a single industry puts Indiana on a collision course with economic pain. South Carolina's economy rides on tourism and manufacturing, both hit hard in recessions. Rising housing costs and stagnant wages squeeze families, while a weak safety net leaves many unprotected. Rural areas already struggling are especially vulnerable to job losses and disinvestment. The state's philosophy of individual responsibility falters when crisis strikes. South Carolina's serene image hides a brewing economic storm. Mississippi ranks last in economic health, lowest incomes, highest poverty, and crumbling infrastructure. The Jackson water crisis is just one symptom of decades of neglect. Rural hospitals are closing, and the refusal to expand Medicaid leaves many uninsured. The social safety net is minimal, and the state relies heavily on federal aid. Any downturn is catastrophic, with little internal capacity to respond. Mississippi's vulnerabilities make it the most fragile state in the Union. For many, the next recession will be a flood, not just a storm. Colorado, a state celebrated for its breathtaking landscapes and booming economy, often paints a picture of prosperity. The majestic Rocky Mountains, the vibrant city of Denver, and the allure of affluent neighborhoods contribute to this image of success and well-being. But beneath this shimmering surface, Colorado hides a mountain of household debt. Many residents are grappling with significant financial burdens, struggling to keep up with the rising cost of living. Credit card statements pile up, debt paperwork becomes overwhelming, and financial documents serve as constant reminders of the challenges they face. This debt is often compounded by unaffordable housing. The dream of homeownership feels increasingly out of reach for many, as property values soar and wages struggle to keep pace. The real estate market, particularly in desirable areas, presents a daunting challenge for those seeking to establish roots in the state. As a result, residents are stretched thin, constantly juggling expenses and making difficult choices to make ends meet. The pressure to maintain a certain lifestyle in a state known for its affluence adds to the financial strain. In this precarious situation, a single lost job can trigger financial disaster. The safety net is often insufficient to cushion the blow, leaving families vulnerable to eviction, bankruptcy, and other devastating consequences. The fear of unemployment looms large for many Coloradans. The economy, as always, is cyclical, subject to the inevitable ups and downs of the market. Colorado's economic health is closely tied to several key sectors. First, tourism, a major driver of revenue and employment, is vulnerable to fluctuations in travel patterns and economic conditions. Second, construction, another vital industry, is sensitive to changes in interest rates and housing demand. And third, energy, including both traditional and renewable sources, is prone to booms and busts, influenced by global market forces and policy decisions. Compounding these economic vulnerabilities is TABOR, a constitutional amendment that significantly impacts the state's fiscal capacity. TABOR restricts the state's ability to raise revenue, limiting its capacity to invest in essential services and respond effectively to economic downturns. It also makes it difficult to build reserves, leaving the state ill-prepared to weather financial storms. As a consequence, public services are starved, with schools, infrastructure, and other vital programs facing chronic underfunding. This fiscal constraint means the government's hands are tied in a crisis, limiting its ability to provide assistance and support to those in need. In light of these challenges, Colorado faces the next recession with one hand behind its back, its ability to respond effectively significantly hampered. The combination of high debt and fiscal constraints creates a dangerous vulnerability for the state. This precarious situation could turn a typical economic downturn into a full-blown disaster, with potentially devastating consequences for residents and the state as a whole. Louisiana faces chronic unemployment, poverty, and a boom-and-bust oil economy. Volatile energy markets and underfunded pensions leave the state with few options in a downturn. Infrastructure is failing, and hurricanes threaten to wipe out what little progress is made. Minimal reserves and a weak safety net compound the risk. Louisiana is fighting on multiple fronts, with little capacity to recover from a major shock. The next economic crash could push the state underwater for good. 10 states, 10 stories, one theme. They're standing on the shakiest economic ground in America. Their vulnerabilities, pension crises, housing bubbles, over-reliance on single industries, threaten not just themselves, but the nation. A collapse in one state sends ripples across the country. Your financial well-being is tied to theirs, whether you realize it or not. Now is the time to prepare, demand better leadership, and build resilience. Awareness is the first step, action is the next. Thank you.